Can you start a nonprofit while working full-time at another job? The short answer is, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And many people who start a nonprofit are doing so while working full-time at another job while they're getting their nonprofit up and running. But I'm guessing what you really want to know is the answer to two other questions. One, what can you expect in terms of time commitment and workload if you're starting a nonprofit and working another job? And two, how can you get to the point where you can quit your other job and work full-time at a nonprofit, assuming that's your goal? So in this video, I'm going to cover both of those things. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Amber Melanie Smith. I am a nonprofit founder and executive director of the nonprofit that I started, and I love sharing everything that I've learned, all my tips and strategies for how to start a nonprofit and create social change and make an impact in your community through this YouTube channel. I really hope that you find this video useful and helpful to you. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you are in need of support and training and resources for starting a nonprofit, check out my website, foundertofulltime.com. Okay, so when I first started my nonprofit, I had just returned from a 3-month cross-country road trip. That's a story for another time. And I was completely broke, so I had to get all sorts of other jobs. I did data entry, I was a bartender for a while, I did all sorts of things while working on the side to get this nonprofit organization up and running. And it took several years, but eventually I was able to work full-time for the organization that I had started. So thinking back on those experiences, the first thing I want to get into with you is that first question, which is what kind of time commitment or workload might be realistic for those of you who are trying to start a nonprofit while working another job. What you really need to know is this, and that is that you get what you put into it. Obviously, the more time you can invest into something, the faster it's going to grow. But there's also nothing wrong with growing and moving along at the pace that works for you. There's going to be a lot of work up front. If you're in the very beginning of your thought process or process of starting a nonprofit, you could easily spend several hours every single week developing a nonprofit business plan, recruiting your board of directors, developing your budget, your marketing plan, your website, etc. Then of course you've got to complete and file your official paperwork to become a fully recognized nonprofit. This varies by country, but in the United States where I am, that's your Form 1023 if you're looking to become a 501c3 tax-exempt public charity. So there's a lot of work that goes into completing that paperwork, especially if you have opted to not hire an attorney to support you on that, which is your choice. And then of course there are costs to all of those things, to the actual filing of the paperwork and do all the other things that come with starting any kind of venture, your website, etc. So if you are starting out with no funding, then you're also going to need to devote a little bit of time in the very beginning to raise that funding in order to get those other steps done. In summary, the work of starting a new nonprofit can feel like a part-time job to some, and in many cases it's almost like that exactly. It's like starting a business. So depending on who you have available to help you with these things, whether it's board members with a particular skill set that can expedite some of these steps, or if you're doing it on your own, if you have team members around you, it could take several months, even a couple of years to do all of that upfront work. I've heard stories that widely vary the amount of time someone spent just getting things set up. And then you're talking about some additional time waiting for your official nonprofit status to be approved by the government once you have submitted your paperwork. In the United States, the IRS says that it can take anywhere between 2 and 12 months for them to approve your nonprofit status. So here are just a couple of tips to manage your own personal time and possibly the time of a team that you're working with to get this done. And these tips will hopefully allow you to expedite the process and get it done as fast as possible. The first is I recommend blocking out time on your personal schedule that's dedicated to working on this. Some amount of hours every week. To include some time you could also meet with other professionals or board members or team members who might be assisting you with the process, like lawyers or accountants, etc. Second, you want to really take stock of the skill sets of the people working with you. You want to understand what talents and professional expertise they're bringing to the table, whether it's marketing or finance or fundraising or accounting. And then you want to identify what tasks and steps in the process to start your nonprofit you can safely delegate to those people and let them own it. And as you are delegating those tasks, setting clear goals and timelines for when each of those tasks will be accomplished, and then meeting regularly and talking about the long-term vision for your organization to really keep people motivated and on track. Now, I mentioned before that there's going to be the wait time after you have gone ahead and filed your official paperwork, but the good news is you can keep doing some of the other tasks necessary to start a nonprofit while you're waiting to hear back about your official nonprofit status, like growing an audience, launching a website, and more. Now let's get into the second part of this video where I'm going to talk about how can you get to the point where you can quit your other job, assuming that is your goal, and work full-time for this nonprofit that you're starting up. What I want to say, and I've said this in several of my other videos, is that it is totally possible to be able to work full-time for a nonprofit that you start. But many things have to fall in place and be completed effectively in order for that to happen. For example, you have to have a board of directors who supports your goal and vision of working full-time for the nonprofit, because it's going to be the board of directors that votes to hire you as paid staff for the organization. As I've mentioned before, you can't vote to hire yourself, and you can't vote for what salary you would make, because that is considered a conflict of interest. And of course, you also need to have enough revenue coming in for your organization to be able to sustain salary and paid staff. Ultimately, it takes hard work and some time, so just be patient with the process. I was just following a thread on Facebook the other day where they were talking about this very question. Founders were saying how long it took them to get from the starting point to the point where they could work full-time for the nonprofits that they started, and the answers were widely varied. I saw 3 years, I saw 11 years, I saw 4 years, I saw 10 years. Now, one woman did say that it took her just 4 months to get to that point, which is honestly a very unique and rare situation, in my opinion. But she did point out something very important, and that is that they had done a ton of planning and working every detail out before they even got started to really make that process go faster. There also might have been some other factors in that particular person's life that I'm unaware of and have no knowledge about, such as the amount of startup funding they already had in place, or how big their audience or group of investors or supporters already was before they started. But those details aside, without me knowing any of that, I can tell you that the thorough planning she's talking about includes several of the following things that I'm going to share with you. If you can do these things, you can certainly ensure that your process of getting from that point to starting up to being able to do this full time can go a bit faster. When any nonprofit starts, they have to think very deeply and critically about two things. First, are they going to be meeting the true, authentic needs of their community? Because remember, you start a nonprofit to serve the community and meet a need, not just because you want to start a nonprofit. You see a problem in your community and you go out there and you try to solve it, and the nonprofit structure happens to be the best fit for solving that problem, and that's when you start a nonprofit. So they've done that. They're meeting a true need, tackling a real problem. And secondly, they've thought through the business side of things, the infrastructure side of things, what ideal staffing would look like, how much money they would need in their annual budget, how they're going to raise that money and keep it coming in regularly, how they're going to market themselves, etc. So if you can do 5 things when you're just starting, you're gonna make this process go a lot faster. And I kind of just alluded to this a moment ago, but thing number 1 is your business and your revenue plan. You've got to understand and figure out how you're going to be generating funds for your nonprofit in the very beginning. Think through how it will tie into your programs, how you're going to generate not just donations, but potentially earned income and other ways you're going to be able to grow your organization organization's budget so you can get to the point where you have the staff needed to execute on the mission of your organization even more effectively. Another benefit of having this business and revenue plan written out in the very beginning is you can use that business plan as a tool to inspire funders and potential supporters to give your organization financial support earlier on. The second thing you should do is really understand how you can best use your own time, especially if you're a founder of an organization in the very beginning, and then delegate whatever you are not the most skilled at to other people. Outsource that stuff. So if you are not a good accountant, but you're a great public speaker, then focus on public speaking. Use your time well and delegate what you can't do well to other people who can do those things well. This will help you grow a lot faster. The third thing is to set up systems and processes whereby people can give you their contact information if they want to learn more about your cause and potentially support your organization in the future early on. So I'm talking about setting up a mailing list, setting up social media where people can engage with you, setting up an email list on your website, and more. After all, growing your audience faster equals more donations and more volunteers faster. Fourth, to beat that sense of overwhelm by having to do all of the things that I listed you'll have to do earlier on in this video, you want to set small, achievable goals with your team and your fellow board members. You want to make sure that you are celebrating your success and your milestones as you move along so that you don't get demotivated and move at a slower pace than you'd actually like to. Fifth is put a number on it. Figure out exactly how much money your organization is going to have to raise in order to hire staff to get you to the point that you are able to work for the organization full time. Again, assuming that's your goal. So do that research early on, identify that number figure, and then work towards it as you're raising money, communicating your success and your progress towards that goal with your fellow board members and team members as you go. Trying to start and grow a new nonprofit while you're working a full-time job somewhere else is not easy, but it is doable with persistence and patience. And all that good planning I just described too. So are you in this situation? Are you trying to start a nonprofit while working a full-time job elsewhere? Share a little bit more about your experience in the comments below. And of course, if you need some extra support and training to help you start a nonprofit and get it to the point where it could potentially be your full-time job, check out my website, foundertofulltime.com. I'm featuring my first online course, Idea to Official, which is all about that planning that I just described and how to validate your nonprofit idea, develop a good program for your organization, and get prepared to file your official status for nonprofit status in the United States. Links to that are also in the description below. Finally, check out my group on Facebook, Change the World or Bust. We've got like 1,600 people or some number of people in there now who are all thinking of or working on starting a nonprofit or other type of social impact venture, and we're just having a good time chatting in there. Once again, I hope that you found this helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.